within symbolism, Angelic Sailor is a polymorphic symbol. So this is a word with multiple meanings. So the word Malak, an angel, is polymorphic of Angelic Sailor. So the angels are represented as angelic sailors, and this really goes into the ufological tradition. These word associations and word plays denote that the jinn are this, they are both an elake, a high creature, but they're also can dematerialize. They're also described as the Ruach Elohim, the high spirits. And I think that this is a really important point to push home to the listener, because the jinn and the seraphim, they've deconstructed the mechanics of waveform reality.
Welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore magic, esoterica, and the world of the spirits, and everything in between. For episode 45, we welcome Pierre Sabak. He is an expert on ancient symbolism and etymology, and is widely recognized as the leading academic in the field of religion, mythology, mysticism, and the esoteric. New Ufology is the study of occult symbolism to deconstruct the ufological tradition, a restricted teaching equated with the flying saucer and its occupants. A completely new field of research. The focus of New Ufology is Scaphology, the study of angelic boats within religion and mythology. Pierre Sabac's work on the saucer cults detail a secret alien code within language that he calls the Artefact, one that is identified archaically with the Angelic Sailor and its human and non-human hosts. Sabak contends that it is only through studying the occult tradition that we can truly comprehend the UFO phenomenon, its astrological origins, and more importantly, its intentions for mankind. And we get into that in the show. What are its intentions for mankind? And it's an interesting path that Pierre takes, coming at this phenomenon through archaic language and through semiotics and morphology. And I think it's, having studied both those in university, I think it's a valid way to look at meaning, particularly meaning that occurs in a symbolic fashion, as it tends to do in this territory. I think a lot of occultists listening will have a varied reaction to the description of certain symbols. But I also think it's important that we get off the map. It's important that we off-road and don't get locked into any particular ideology. For us to see the full picture, we have to look at the six sides of the cube. That's, as an old history teacher of mine used to say. Before we get into the show, I'd like to say a big thank you to patron Merrily for her support. Without people like you Merrily, the Spirit Box would struggle to keep going, so I really, really appreciate your patronage. And I'd just like to add, I'm always interested in people's experiences with the other, from hauntings to shadow people. So if you have a story to tell, reach out to me, either on Patreon or Twitter on Insta. I'm always interested in hearing what people have experienced and what people's views on these phenomena are. If you like the Spirit Box and want to support the show, then there are a number of ways you can do so. There's, of course, Patreon, where you can get the Plus show and extra content and join the community there. Or you can hit the PayPal link that's on it's on the YouTube channel and in my link tree. Yeah, if you do feel so inclined, then I thank you in advance. Pierre Sabak, you're very welcome to the Spirit Box. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to speaking to you and your audience.
Great stuff. Well, looking through your material, there's a really interesting range of work that I think is going to be of real interest to the Spirit Box audience. So to start with, to get things started, can you tell listeners a bit about who you are, your work, and what got you started in this field?
Okay. We'll start with the basics. Basically, I became interested in flying saucers as a child. This was because I saw a rocket in the field at my grandmother's, and my grandmother didn't really pay much attention to what I was saying, and I was quite surprised about what I'd seen. But from then onwards, I had this profound interest in flying saucers, the paranormal, and that's something which I researched as a teenager and growing up. But that was just something which was a part of lots of other different interests. So, for example, I was very interested in fine art, and I went to university. I studied fine art painting. My specialism was art history, and so I studied semiotics, which is essentially the deconstruction of the sign, which I refer to in my own work as illuminautics. So I've taken the word semiotics and I've elaborated upon it, and I've created the neologism illuminautics, which is the study of the signs of the Illuminati, which is really symbolism. And this is my specialism. In particular, etymological symbolism from the Greek root etymos, meaning truth. So, yeah, I kind of it stemmed from my childhood. It wasn't an encounter or anything like that. I mean, what I saw was in a field, and it was at least a distance away from a field. It seemed to be quite large, the object, possibly the size of a house. It looked like a silo, what you would find in a farmer's field, but it just took off at a right angle, and it went up and it flew over my head fairly high, about the height of a low flying aeroplane. And that was my beginning and my interest in the subject. But I just think everything has come together in my life, in terms of studying fine art, in terms of studying symbolism. For a while, I was a teacher as well, and I think that this also helped in terms of putting the information together. I think when you study symbolism, you begin to realize that it's an immensely complicated subject because you're not dealing with one discipline, you're dealing with multiple disciplines, whether this is etymological symbolism, the deconstruction of language, whether you're looking at alphanumeric encryption, such as gematria or astrotheological symbolism. So I think one of the important things which I really want to try and impress upon the viewer is the fact that the symbol is multifaceted. It's layered, it's nuanced, it's based upon this private discourse, this idioglossolalia, literally private discourse. And so the symbol, if you like, has this overt meaning, which is this open meaning, and then it has this covert meaning, which is this private discourse. And so symbolism, yes, is very complex. And I think it's very complex, particularly for people who are just entering the subject, because many people are illiterate in terms of decoding symbology. And so it's a whole new area of expertise. And so that's something that people need to be, shall we say, a little bit patient with, particularly myself, because I'm a symbologist. So I often go into a lot of intricate depth, and sometimes listeners can be a little bit overwhelmed with the material. But I just really want to point out about the fact that the symbol really, I think for many novices, a lot of people presume that the symbol only has one meaning. So, for example, the sun would be a symbol of life or would be a symbol of regeneration. But really, there are multiple meanings which are packed into the symbol, and it is a matter of unpacking those meanings. So, I really need the audience to appreciate the fact that really, when we're dealing with symbolism, we're dealing with an encyclopedic level of knowledge, and so that's something to take into consideration. So yeah, so that's some of my interests and the beginnings of how all this started.
I can imagine that your training in the history of art must have been very useful in terms of like reading the language of art, reading paintings, and the symbolic structure within art.
Yes, and I think that I think out of all of the subjects that you could study, if you were interested in symbology, then obviously semiotics and the deconstruction of the sign is really the starting point. And with semiotics, an image is read almost like a text. And this is the same with the symbol, because the symbol is read as a text. And typically the symbol will have an etymological encryption in terms of that there are word associations or word plays. Now, the technical word for a word play is paranomasia, and this literally means other naming. And it's really where where the individual draws psychic inference between words which are of similar pronunciation or similarity in terms of how they're pronounced morphologically. So, for example, and this is something which I write about, which is intrinsic to my work, this idea of the angelic sailor. So within symbolism, Malacca sailor is a polymorphic symbol. So this is a word with multiple meanings. So the word Malacca, an angel, is polymorphic of Malacca sailor. So the angels are represented as angelic sailors, and this really goes into the ufological tradition, but we're dealing here with the occult tradition. So this is something which is hidden or concealed, and this pertains to the origins of ufology. And I describe this in my work as new ufology. And new ufology is really the deconstruction of occult symbolism within ufology. And this is another thing that we need to be mindful of, is that ufology is really based upon occult symbolism. And so again, we're dealing with this private discourse. Now, something which is intrinsic to new ufology is the representation of the boat, and this I refer to as Scaphology. Scaphology is this academic tradition, which is essentially it's this redacted tradition, and it's based upon the deconstruction of the angelic boat. And so the word in scaph, which is a type of small vessel, typically a small vessel which is moored to a larger vessel. The wording comes from scapto, to dig out. So this is a hollow vessel. So it's a study of hollow vessels, but specifically vessels which relates to angels or deities within the religious and mythological tradition. And that's really the expertise of my work. And this is the basis of my book, Holographic Culture, which is the study of Scaphology, the study of these angelic boats and vessels. So yeah, and I mean, if you like, a further adaptation of Scaphology is cytology. So, for example, Scaphology studies angelic boats, and in this respect, when I refer to the word an angelic boat, this is very correct to the original Aramaic. So, for example, in the Aramaic, Zar means an angel, but it's polymorphic. It's a polymorphic symbol. Zar also means an angel or a stranger or a foreigner. So within the ancient mysteries, the angels were represented as strange or foreign. They were alien. And in addition, Zar, which is an alien or a stranger, a visitor, an angel or an alien, as we said, is related to the word Sira, which is a boat. And this is important when we're dealing with the Ben Sira, which is a son of a boat. Now, as I said before, this Ben Sira, the son of a boat, is implicit of Malak, an angel, and Malak, a sailor. And the Sons of a Boat is working on another special type of wordplay, which is known as diptych paranomasia. Diptych paranomasia is a wordplay from one language into another. So, for example, the Hebrew word sirah, meaning a boat, as in Ben Sirah, son of a boat, is a diptych paranomasia on the Arabic word sirah, which is Sirius. So the Ben Sirah, son of a boat, is the son of Sirius, and the son of Sirius are these angels which originated from Sirius. And this goes into the traditions of non-looking, non-human angels, which are known as the Seraphim. And this is really important when we begin to look at the jinn and the angelic tradition, because we have two groups of angels, one which is non-human, and then which are the seraphim, which are represented as serpents or reptiles, and then we've got the humanoid angels, which are represented as the cherubim. And again, both the seraphim and the cherubim, and I refer to this within occult philosophy as the seraphim cherubim dialectic, which is this occult knowledge appertaining to these two groups of angels. Now, typically, knowledge has been transferred to humanity from two sets of angels, which are the cherubim tradition, which is the humanist tradition, and then the seraphim, which is the non-human angels. Now, within occult philosophy, this is the Pythagorean Euclidean dialectic. Pythagoras is Pythagoras. Pythagoras is the speaker of the serpent, which in this case is the Seraphim, which are these non-human angels. And Euclid, who wrote the elements of geometry, his name comes from Euclid, to copy our ape, from the Arabic root kurd, which is an ape. As I said before, it's a diptych paronomasia. So the idea of copying Euclid is in the Greek Euclides is good glory, in this respect, meaning to be renowned. So the renowned philosopher, his name is this diptych paronomasia on the Arabic. And this is important because particularly when you're studying the pseudepigraphic text and the apocrypha and the scriptural tradition, you have these types of word plays which are typically going from the Greek into the Aramaic or into the Arabic. And again, it's found within Islamic discourse as well. So a lot of the Arab theologians will just focus on the Arabic, but many of the word plays in the Quran are going into the Greek. And you have this wonderful infusion of hermetical traditions which are found within the Quran, but which are not really written about. And so, for example, if you were looking at the Crewmember within the Quran, which are the noble scribes. Now, according to Quranic discourse, the Crewmember are said to record all of the deeds of man, and you have these two recording scribes, which records the good and the bad deeds of humans. Well, the Kuramin Katabin are also found within the Greek and the Hermetical traditions, and also within the Socratic tradition. It's said with Socrates that he had two daemons, an Agatha daemon, which was his good daemon, and then he had a Kaku daemon, which was his bad daemon. And so again, this is really, if you like, the inspiration behind the Islamic tradition of the noble scribes. And this tradition goes back into the jinn. So this is something which is the Karen.
Yeah, the Korean. Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah, that's right.
The twin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a kind of there's
the Karen,
magical overlap. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but the Karen is etymological to ayin, which is an eye, and erin, which is a watcher or a shining one. And so, and again, the erin are very interesting because the erin, the watcher, is polymorphic of the shining one. Now, the erin are described in the Testament of Amram as looking like a viper. And so, again, we're dealing here with the Seraphim. So again, with the wordplay of the Seraphim, you've got Sophefa watcher, Serapha serpent, Serapha, which is fire, which is otherwise the Erin, a watcher or a shining one, or which is otherwise the jinn. Now, the jinn's etymology is coming from jana, to hide or to conceal, but is closely concordant with the Old Semitic noun jen, a serpent or worm. And so the shining ones is used as an astrotheological marker of Sirius. And again, so for example, Sarah, which means spark, is used to denote the seraphim, Serapha, which is fire. Now, Sarah, spark, is etymological to Sira, which is Sirius, the sparkling one. The sparkling one, therefore, is equated with fire signifiers, which is identified with the seraphim. And so what's very interesting is that when you're dealing with the Ben Sira, the son of a boat, as we said, it's a diptych paronomasia on Sira, which is Sirius. They are typically identified with Sirius, and they're identified with being strange. Zar is an alien, stranger. Muzar is the etymology for strange, that which is strange, and Sira, which is a boat. And so that's very interesting that the angels are identified with these boats and vessels. But it becomes much more interesting because not only are the angels identified with these ships and vessels and chariots, but we see that they're equated with these elliptical vessels, which are ostensibly the same as flying saucers. So, for example, the Aramaic word for a flying saucer would be ophan, which is a wheel, collectively the ophanim wheels. Now, this is because the ophanim wheels are said to be constructed from a series of cogs. And again, this is coming from, so the word ophan, a wheel, is related to pana, which is to turn or to spin. So these are spinning wheels. Now, pana is very important within symbology because the word pana, to turn, is also related to panim, which is a face. And so these spinning wheels were sometimes represented as a face. For example, in the Bible, Moses speaks to God face to face, panim, a face. Pana, to turn, is equated to ophan, a wheel. So these kind of wheels or vessels were seen to be telepathic. They're teleological devices, which are almost alive in the same way we would describe them as having a type of artificial intelligence. And this is why the opening wheels were typically described as angels, and often they were described as being alive as well. And this was intrinsic to the symbology of the wheels. And so the idea of a head as well is also found within Templar symbolism as well, because the Templars worshipped, if you like, these heads. And the head is used to denote the opening wheels, which are these flying vessels. As it again, we find a similar type of wordplay between nous, the mind, and nous, which is a boat or a vessel in the Greek. And again, this is the idea that the mind controls the ship; it steers the ship or the vessel. And again, it's going back into this idea that they're teleological devices, pneuma, which is the spirit. And so this is ancient knowledge, and it's been buried within the Scaphological tradition, which is this symbolic discourse appertaining to these angelic boats and vessels. These heads are, again, within the Rosicrucian traditions. You've got Christian Rosenkreuz, and his initials are RCK. Now, within the Rosicrucian tradition, the Rosicrucians typically use triangles to separate to separate words as like a full stop. Now, this triangle is used to denote a tooth. Now, significantly, the Hebrew word for a tooth is shen. Shen is a tooth, but it's polymorphic of a cog. So the tooth, which originally would be a tooth of a cog, is also a cog. And shen is related etymologically to san, which is a saucer. So these cogs, or the opening wheels, these flying saucers, are put together as a series of cogs Now, teeth become very important within symbolism because teeth are planted. In other words, they're buried at ancient sites. And going back to the Rosicrucian tradition, you've got Christian Rosenkreuz, in which the Rosicrucian tradition is founded. Now, it was said that his tomb, that inside was this written tradition, again, tomb, and there's a word play on tome. But again, these vessels are equated with the written tradition. So if you like, because these vessels are alive, or that they are equated with the mind and that they can transfer information, they can be read almost like a book. And when we're dealing with Christian Rosenkreuz, when we put in the initials, the A, which is used within Rosicrucian symbology, we get the word Karak. So Christian Rosenkreuz, when you put in the letters, the triangles, an A and another A, you get the word Karak, which is a type of boat or a vessel. So inside of Christian Rosenkreuz's tomb was a ship or a vessel, which is equated with the rose, the symbology of the rose, because the rose, again, senna, which is a thorn bush, is equated with Sinai, and zinai, which is the boss of a shield, which is, if you like, a type of a thorn. But the shield and the boss is equated in symbology with the cog and the wheel, because the tooth of the cog can be, so the circle and the triangle is both an axle and a wheel, or is also a shield and a boss. They are one and the same things. And so, yeah, this is some of the complexities, if you like, behind the symbolism of the Rosicrucian order. Now, the rose itself is easily grafted, and so it relates to this grafted bloodline, and it relates to, again, sub rosa, that which is hidden. The morphology of rosa, which is to hide, is where you get the etymology of rota, which is a wheel. And so that which is hidden is a wheel, which equates to this grafting of bloodlines, which are identified with family trees, which are genealogical trees, which goes back to the traditions of the jinn and to this undisclosed bloodline. That's a little bit of some of the ideas which I'm interested in and what I'm researching currently.
Thank you. I really appreciate that overview. So with so you're pulling together a lot of different ideas there, and
Sure.
it's fantastic that you're unpacking the linguistic roots and etymology and what have you. It's it's really interesting to see that unfold. I think one thing I'd like to ask is that when you look at the idea of like putting this together as new ufology,
Sure.
I think the questions that I'd like to ask is, how has that been received by the UFO community? Where do you get challenged, and and where do you see the fundamental difference?
Okay. Yeah, some really good questions there. Um, I th- Well, I think first of all that the UFO community is not really aware of the occult tradition of ufology, and I think that this is important to understand. It's just very basic things. So, for example, if you look at Adamski's flying saucers, typically he within the flying saucer of the photographs, you've got the circle and you've got the triangle, which again is a symbol of the cog. Now, Adamski's photographs are obviously fraudulent, but Adamski is coming from this veiled tradition. He was in the circle of knowledge. He was disclosing knowledge. But again, even when we look at his name, Adam and Sky, so this idea that the Adamic man originates from the sky, which in the occult tradition and in the biblical and apocrypha tradition, this would be the Martian, because the etymology of Adam is related to Machadim, which is Mars, Adam, which is red. Adam are the earth. The red earth is where Adam originated from, the Martian, which is Eden, and he was cast out of Eden, which was Mars, and he was replanted on the earth. But before this, if we pick this up in the Zoroastrian tradition, the seed of man was planted on the moon. Hence, we get the word plays the man in the moon, man and moon. But again, similarities are also found also within the Greek word plays as well. But the seed of man was taken to the moon and then was deposited on the earth. And this is found certainly within the Quran, because in the Quran it states that Allah created man from a drop of sperm. And that denotes the fact that there was a primordial man in which this Adamic man was based upon. God didn't just create man out of thin air. With reference to this, God plants humanity on the earth, and this is referred to as the second creation. And the second creation is really distinct from the first creation, because the first creation is the creation of the universe. It's the creation of the anthropos, which are these three, well, essentially they're represented as three humanoid races. And when I say humanoid, I want the audience to be aware that here we're dealing with human in the very general sense of the word. So, for example, in the Greek, sometimes a non-human angel would be referred to as an anthropos, literally human, but it's not supposed to be interpreted in a literal sense. The best interpretation of the word would be humanoid, in terms of that the angel is being given a degree of respect. They're being described as sentient, as intelligent. And so the anthropos was the creation of these three undiluted races, which were human, non-human, which were the seraphim, and then you've got the demigods, or the daemons. And what happened, this was the first creation, which was the creation of the universe and the anthropos. And in the second creation, the races became corrupted through genetic engineering, through the grafting of the bloodlines, or the stitching of the bloodlines. This is the symbology within the ancient world. They referred to the idea of the stitching together of bloodlines, or the idea of grafting bloodlines, and they typically would use tree signifiers to denote the idea of a grafting of a bloodline. So then you had the corruption of the anthropos, and then the recreation of mankind and the planting of man's seed on the earth, which then links into a covenant of worlds, which is equated with Orion. It's a very complicated story. It goes back into astrotheology. It's encoded in the traditions of Homer, again, Homo sapien. So Homer is coming from this humanist tradition, which is very distinct, let's say, from the poet Ovid. Again, Ovid is a wordplay on Ophid, which is a serpent, which is a seraphic tradition. But the occult tradition, it can be represented as this partition within the priesthood between the seraphic knowledge and the humanist knowledge. which is the demarcation within the priesthood, whether it's the Sunni and the Shiite, the Protestant and the Catholics. But it's represented within Freemasonry as the two pillars. So the two pillars represents these two pillars of knowledge or of learning, which is essentially the Pythagorean Euclidean dialectic or the Seraphim Cherubim dialectic. This dialectic or knowledge or discourse or dialogue between humanoid angels and non-human angels. So I think there may have been another part to that question. I'm not sure if so. Yeah, so in terms of new ufology, I don't really think that modern researchers are aware of new ufology or the implications of occult symbolism,
Right.
because they're not literate within symbolism. And I also think that in terms of ufology, the general consensus, now I'm speaking here more amongst the intellectual class, is that ufology is something that developed with Roswell in 1945. Now, my research into Scaphology just puts that idea to bed. It's completely erroneous. New ufology goes back into the ancient world. It goes back into the word flying saucer is used to denote in the ancient languages these type of vessels, which were identified with shields. So Oplon, a shield, is equated with Pleon, which is a boat. And again, the flying shields were represented as missiles as well, because in the ancient world, the Latin word missilis, which is a missile, was used typically not to denote an elongated missile, as how we would view the word within the modern parlance, but was used to denote these flying shields. So typically what they would do is that they would take a shield and fill it of hot oil or sand and excrement, and they would bind them together and they would fling them from these catapults, and they would spin through the air, and they would sink ships, and they would be used to destroy fortifications. And so these flying shields were equated both with a boat, Pleon a boat, Oplon a shield, Opolite, which is a shield bearer, which in this case would be the angelic host. And again, this idea is that they were a naval crew of a naval vessel, Malak an angel, Malak a sailor. But the Opolite, a soldier, who equated with the crew members of these vessels. Again, they're identified with abduction. So the word Arpi, Arpue, an abductor, is equated with Opolon, a soldier, Erpton, which is a reptile, Apto, which is to shine or to radiate, from the root word to kindle a fire. This is identical. This is polyglottal symbolism, which is found with the Seraphim. Chauvet is a captor, Seraph a serpent. We've got Serapha, which is fire. So all of the same signifiers. And again, even the Seraphim is identified with the sailor. Seraph a serpent, Sapan a sailor, Safina a ship. The same is found also with the humanist tradition and the cherubim. You've got cherub, carib, which is a boat, specifically a very small vessel or a landing vessel, and again equated with keruv, which is a sword. So these are armed sailors. I would translate the word as a marine, because a marine is both a sailor but is also armed, is like a soldier. So the cherubim are really marines. They are mariners, but they are equated with an invading host. So the etymology would be best conveyed with the wording marine, a space marine, because they come from heaven. So
I suppose that leads me on to kind of unpacking that, the end bit there about kind of the marine and kind of, and in your work you talk about this idea of an invading host, and you've looked at that in terms of like the astrological origins, but you also kind of mentioned some of your work about kind of what are the intentions for mankind. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Again, what I speak about is conjecture, because I'm not in the circle of knowledge. But my understanding of this, having studied this, is that these beings are interested in knowledge, and in actual fact, knowledge is the currency of the universe. And so therefore, these entities are mining knowledge. And what they're particularly interested in is emergent systems. Now, emergent systems are systems of evolution, and they're studying evolutionary cycles. And I believe that they're doing this because they're a predatory species and they want to stay at the top of the food chain. And there are other species which are again competing with them. And so this knowledge is very important. And therefore, they have planted other worlds. Again, within the Quran, God is described as the Lord of all of the worlds. Now, we're talking about the worlds in terms of both the spiritual world, we're talking about the physical world, we're talking about astrotheologically, the different astrological worlds. And so, yeah, we're dealing here with a species which are interested in evolution, and they've planted seeds on many different planets, and many of these different planets are at different stages. And I think what the Seraphim are doing is that they effectuate these emergent cycles through, for example, through weather or through climate change or through economic cycles, and they can speed up or slow down evolution. And I think that they're very interested in the evolution of different creatures and entities, not only humanity, but other types of entities. And they can read, my understanding of this is that they can read these patterns. So whether it's they're reading the patterns of how an ant thinks, or the cycle of an ant, or the migration patterns of killer whales, or indeed in terms of human beings and their development of architecture and their ability to improvise and to develop and to evolve in that way. So that's my understanding of what they're doing and why they're here. And but the traditions of our relationship with them is really, shall we say, that the relationship is that there's a degree of antagonism, and it seems to go back into the distant past, or perhaps even into the future. Again, I want to make it clear that we're dealing here with a holographic species. And so sometimes when we're dealing with ancient mythology, it's very difficult to know whether we're dealing with the ancient past or with the future. But at some point within man's trajectory, what occurs is that mankind is nearly destroyed. This is described as the Titanomachy, the war in heaven. This is literally the war of the Titans. And this then leads to the replanting of the human races on the earth. Now, the Titanomachy is equated closely with the Nephilim, which is this conjoined lineage from the daughters of Adam, and the Bene Elohim, which are the sons of the gods. Now, the Bene Elohim, the sons of the gods, the word Elohim is equated with Erin, which is a watcher or a shining one. Now, we know that the Erin are a type of seraphim because in the Testament of Amram, Amram describes the Erin as having a face like a viper. So the Bene Elohim are described in the book of Enoch as procreating with mortal women. But in the book of Enoch, the Bene Elohim are described as the watchers. So the word Bene Elohim, the sons of the gods, is a synonym for the Erin, which is a watcher who is described as having a face like a viper. So in this respect, we know that the Elohim can be understood to be a type of seraphim or dragon. And the terminology Nephilim is equated astrologically with Nephilia, which is Orion. Again, the descendants of the Bene Elohim, the Nephilim, they're also often referred to as the Gibborim. And again, Gibbor is the Arabic word for Orion. So again, we're dealing with the star system Orion. Now, we can be a little bit more specific because they're actually equated with Yad al-Jazza, the hand of Orion. Sometimes the hand of Orion is also known as the shoulder of Orion. This is certainly important when you're dealing with the symbology of the harpy, because in some of the Greek depictions of the harpies, you have an image or a sculpture of a harpy, and on the back they have these wings, but the wing is a special type of visual pun. It's known as visioparanomasia, a type of visual pun. So the wing is drawn as a scapula, which is a shoulder blade. Now, the shoulder blade is used to denote the shoulder of Orion, which is the hand of Orion. Now, the hand of Orion in Freemasonry is referred to as the hidden hand, which is this discourse between this conjoined lineage, which is this unsanctified lineage. The sanctified conjoined lineage is the royal lineage, and certainly you would find this within the Greek word plays of anax, which is a prince or a leader, and anak, which is the Hebrew word, a giant. The sons of Anak were the sons of the giants. So there is this correspondence in the Greek. And again, the archon, an angel or a ruler, is polymorphic, is equated with drakon. But the stem of archon, arcane to rule, is going back to the Babylonian root, akan, which is a seraph. Again, it would be found and picked up in the Arabic word akim, which is a ruler or a leader. And again, coming from the wording aka, which is to talk or to speak. So the dragons are equated with the profusion of language or the conveyance of language, and they are the social architects because they control language. And I refer to this in holographic culture as the artifact. The artifact is this alien code which is encrypted within language. It's the DNA or the signature which is found within human symbolism, and it pertains to the others, this allosagoria, this other speaking. But allos, other, is used to denote the angels. So this other speaking is referring to the others, which are the angels. And so allos, other, is a paranomasion, halos, which is a halo. So the others are represented with the shining halo, which fits into the symbology of the Ben Sira, the sons of a boat, or the Ben Sira, the sons of Sirius, which are represented as a shining opening wheel, which are these angelic vessels equated with Sirius. So that's that's a little bit of background information.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I mean, you're very much saying, like, this is something that goes way back into antiquity, probably a precursor to humanity.
That's correct. So we're dealing here with the species that has been intricately entwined within the history of humanity, and we're talking about the Adamic human, which is modern Homo sapiens. My understanding of this is that there was a primordial human which was prior to humanity. I refer to this as the proto-human. And my understanding of this would be that the cherubim angels are equated with the proto-humans. Now, I make this analysis on the basis that there is another type of humanoid angel known as the Ishim. The Ishim are equated with Ish is man. So the Ishim are these humanoid angels. This again goes into what's known as the tripartite or the tripartite Illuminati. So what you have is the three orders of the Illuminati. Now, the Illuminati are composed of the Axari, a brother of light. In the Arabic, this is where you would get the word for Illuminati in the Latin word. But the Axari, the Arabic, is a wordplay on the Aramaic word Akzari, a brother of an angel. But as we said, the word Zar is polymorphic of a stranger or an alien. So the terminology, the brother of an angel, is equated with a brother of an alien. And the term Zar, an angel, is equated with Sira, which is a boat, which, as we said, is Sira in Arabic, which is Sirius. Or Surah would be the mysteries of Ra. But again, Ra is coming from the root to watch. And again, is closely concordant in Hebrew with which is a watcher, Ra, which is to watch, which are the Erin. So again, we're dealing here with the symbology of the dragon, Drakane, which is the Greek word to watch, as in a sentinel, and again is closely related to the root to flash. So this idea that Erin, the watchers, are the shining ones, which has this astrotheological symbology equated with Sirius. But another idea, which I think is intrinsic and is important to the watchers, is that they are telepathic. And so, for example, the Kari means telepathic, and the watchers, Erin, a watcher or a shining one, when they establish communication, and we find this also within alien abduction, people describe seeing light. And so they seem to communicate using some type of photon beam, some type of pulsar technology, which might be very similar to microwave technology. So they use photons in order to communicate telepathically.
So just on that last point, I mean, do you think these beings then are a material life forms?
This is a really good question. In some respect, well, humanity is both physical and spiritual. we're dealing here with a physical species, and certainly within the traditions of the jinn, the word jinn means a ghost or a spirit. But the jinn are said to be physical beings and can be killed, and they have these inordinate lifespans. And again, within the Apocrypha traditions, it is said that the fallen angels will be destroyed and will be killed. So again, this idea is that this is a species which can be killed. And again, when we're looking at the Elohim, sometimes the Elohim are referred to as an Elake, a living God. But the terminology K in the Aramaic can also mean an animal. So this is an Elake, a living God, is polymorphic. It can also be translated as a high animal. And the terminology K is very important because in the Hebrew, Kazar is used for the modern Hebrew word for an alien, a space alien, as in K as in living, and then Zar, which is the old word for an alien or an angel. So the Kazar is a living angel or a living alien. So yes, they are living and they are alive, and therefore they are equated with procreation as well. The Bene Elohim fathered the offspring. And we see that there's a connection in the Arabic between, let's say, Allah and Al, which is a family, or Jinsiya, nationality, and the Jinn, Jinsi, which is sexual. And again, Jinn and Genesis. So these word associations and word plays denote that the Jinn are this, they are both an Elake, a high creature, but they're also can dematerialize. They're also described as the Ruach Elohim, the high spirits. And I think that this is a really important point to push home to the listener, because the jinn and the seraphim, they've deconstructed the mechanics of waveform reality. So they understand the difference between the waveform, which is the dematerialization, and then the particle, which is the manifestation of the living form. And so, within the biblical and the apocryphal traditions, the jinn, the seraphim, the angels, they are described as this paradoxical species. This is a species which is both alive, they're physical, they can be killed, and again in the Quran it refers to that Allah in Al Shura, it describes how Allah could wish the vessels to stand still, and again the implication, or he could destroy the occupants of these vessels. Now, as we said before, the terminology for an angel is Malak, an angel, and Malak, a sailor. So this idea that Yahweh could destroy the occupants of the vessels, it's really referring to the idea that the occupants of the vessels, which are angels, can be destroyed. Again, we're dealing here with a living life form, which is paradoxical. They can dematerialize. So the jinn, jana, to hide or to conceal, are typically described as being invisible. They're an invisible race. They are hidden, and therefore they are part of the occult tradition. The etymology of occult comes from the root word to conceal, as does the jinn, jana, to hide or to conceal. And the signature of the hidden tradition is the all-seeing eye. Drakos is the old Greek word for eye, dirk, to see. Drakain, again, to watch. Drakon is a sentinel. As we said, Sopheth, a watcher. Seraph, a serpent, which are the seraphim, these non-human angels. So the all-seeing eye is this seraphic tradition, which is equated with the seraphic host, which are this paradoxical species. Now, I know certainly within, let's say, I describe this as the alien dialectic. Are the aliens spiritual or are they physical? And the intellectuals typically argue amongst themselves over this, but the most I think the most prevalent point amongst the intelligentsia is that they're a non-physical species. But when you actually begin to look at the apocryphal traditions, you realize that they are this paradoxical species. Now, the fact that their vessels are buried at temple sites denotes that we're dealing here with a technological species. And so they have deconstructed the mechanics of waveform reality. And I think this is another thing as well. So when I describe them as a holographic culture, and that's the name of my book. Now, a holographic culture is this species which can disassemble reality. And once you get to the point of being able to disassemble reality, you can travel from interplanetary, from different star systems. Again, within the ufological tradition, people will often describe that when they go into a flying saucer, that the flying saucer on the inside is larger than on the outside. So they can also control space, and it is connected to the idea of controlling the waveform reality. But not only this, but they've also interpenetrated the implicit realm of ideas. And the implicit realm is this realm of what Plato described as universal forms. So the spiritual realm is the realm of ideas, and the realm of ideas is particularized as a physical form. Physicists would describe the juxtaposition as the implicated realm and the explicated realm, or the physical realm. And so they are the masters of all the worlds, of the spiritual world and of the physical world. Now, I know some researchers would argue that the jinn are totally a psychic species. And again, you've got the wordplay on daemon and dianoia, through the mind. Again, this idea that they can communicate telepathically. But I think when you actually go into the symbology, the jinn are this physical race. And as I mentioned before, the jinn are identified with flying shields. So jinn is related to junna, which is the Aramaic word for a shield, jen, a serpent or a worm, jana, to hide or to conceal. And the symbology of the jinn is typically shown with the shield and the serpent. This in Greek symbolism would be the aegis. The aegis is a flying shield, is equated in the Hebrew with eger, which is the helm of a vessel, and haggai, which is a saint, hagios, to be saint-like. So yeah, the Haggai are this angelic lineage, which are equated with the descendants of a boat. And again, even within the Roman mysteries, you will often have the proconsuls, and their statues will be shown within a shield. And so the symbology is that they are born of a boat or a vessel. We would say in English kingship. So that or kingship or lordship denotes one who is born of a boat or a vessel, which would describe in the ancient tradition Malak an angel, Malak a sailor, Melech a king. We would say kingship. Or we could possibly use the terminology highness. Highness would denote the Bene Elohim, the sons of the high ones, the sons of the gods. So again, we're seeing that the terminology is very explicit, and that the royal lineage are equated with the grafting of bloodlines and these family trees, which are often symbolized in conjunction with shields. So that's some of the symbology. But again, if you look at the Persian word for a leader, mal, a leader, is a wordplay on ma, which is a serpent. Or you've got Basilius, a king, and Basilikos, a serpent in the Greek. Again, in the Arabic, Sarif is a lord, and you've got Seraph, which is a serpent. Le Seraph, to combine. So this idea of combining together, and again, even within the Levitical traditions, lavar is to combine together. This idea that the priesthood are conjoined with the spiritual tradition, which are equated with the jinn. But as we said, the jinn are this paradoxical race which can materialize physically as physical entities, the Elokeh, a high creature or a living god.
So the excuse me, within a lot of the occult concepts that you've spoken to, or rather broader, some of the religious concepts in terms of like the Lord of Worlds.
Sure.
And you mentioned the Freemason pillars, you
Yeah.
know, like unpacking those from an occult framework, you can see how they're mapped out. Like I say, particularly the pillars in the Tree of Life, and then the various sephiroths that map out different different planes, or you could describe them as different worlds. I mean, do you think that's also what's been described there, rather than different material worlds? When we talk about the Lord of the Worlds, are we talking about the Lord of different
Both.
realities?
Yes, no, then this is another very important thing, because obviously this is the thing about holographic culture, is that they're interdimensional. Now, humanity ourselves, we are on the brink of becoming a holographic culture. The colliders, which we're using to bombard electrons, this is the basis of research which will lead us, as long as we don't kill ourselves or blow up our solar system or something ridiculous like that, we will become a holographic culture. So we're on the threshold of learning about this. But the jinn, they've deconstructed this. And this goes back to the Pythagorean system, or otherwise known as the Pythagorean monochord. Now, with the monochord, you've got a single string, and the slowest vibration of the string is physical dense reality, and the quickest vibration of the of the string is at the spirit. Now, within the symbology, the different notes represents different dimensions, and so this is very important when you're dealing with the muses. For example, the muses are equated with different dimensions, in particular with different musical notes. And I believe that within the symbology, in terms of the name of God, some of the most secret names of God are equated with vowels, because the vowels are equated with musical notes, and these different musical notes are equated with different dimensions. So yes, we're dealing with an interdimensional race, and they're outside of time because they've deconstructed time and space. But as a result of deconstructing time and space, they've also deconstructed the implicit realm of ideas, which is the spiritual realm. And this is why they also appear within the shamanic traditions, because they are able to go into the realm of ideas. And this is again why they can communicate through dreams, because they have breached this realm of ideas, which is the spiritual realm. So yes, so this is what's very intriguing, because I think ufologists will often get very stuck on the details. They'll say, no, they're spiritual, and give numerous examples, or they'll say that they're physical, and give numerous examples. But when you look at the occult tradition, they're all of the above. They're both physical, they're spiritual, they're interdimensional, they're astrotheological, they're astrological, they're spiritual. They're all of the above. And so we're dealing here with a very sophisticated species. They are a holographic culture, but there are many beings which have reached this level of learning in which that they're a holographic culture. But I think what's very important in terms of the earth is that the Seraphim, which are equated with Sirius, they've planted this world, and so they own this world. This world is, if you like, their property. And so this makes me believe, I'm of the opinion that there are certainly protocols in terms of other races visiting this planet. So, for example, if I had an airplane, I just couldn't fly over China. I would have to get permission to fly over into the airspace. And I think that this is the same with other beings and other entities. It's not that they're not a part of the cult tradition, because they are a part of the cult tradition, but essentially the cult tradition is compartmentalized between the humanist and the non-human angels, but in particular the Seraphim, which are identified with Sirius. And this is because they are the progenitors of life on this planet. And so this is why they're so much figured within the symbology.
So then in terms of when we look at kind of the broader world of ufology, or just study of alien interaction, there's a vast range of entities that people have had experiences with. You've got kind of obviously your greys, your mantids, and you mentioned kind of reptilian beings, but also you've got kind of like the Billy Meyer type entities. I mean, are you hypothesizing that these are all expressions of the same thing?
Well, as I said before, we're dealing here with a multivariate phenomenon. But the thing is that obviously that a lot of the interactions occurring on this planet are with specific beings which are tied into the history of humanity from an occult perspective. I think with Billy Mayer, I mean, he's got a tattoo of an anchor again, which would be equivalent to an angelic sailor. So again, there seems to be a lot of occult symbology in terms of the Billy Mayer case. And I think that this is where new ufology would be very useful, because I think a lot of the cases within modern ufology, they need to be deconstructed as a text, as we said before, utilizing semiotics and therefore the deconstruction of the sign, because the discourse and the symbology is highly elliptical. We're dealing here with this veiled discourse, or this alasagoria, this other speaking.
Well,
so
can I just say that I think that your approach is really interesting, and I think the fact that you're looking at this from a symbolic point of view, to unpack the linguistic structures that you're putting the thread on, I think it is really interesting. And I think one of the big failings of the kind of UFO world broadly, and I'd say the whole kind of Bigfoot research is in a similar way, is it's entirely seen as a physical nuts and bolts, hair samples, footprints, um, extremely empirical way of seeing these types of phenomena, and they clearly transcend that.
Absolutely.
I think your approach is great. I think that your approach is really interesting, and I think there's lots of occultists who will be would take certain interpretations of symbols and what have you, um, um, up with you. I think that you'd
Mm,
probably get some pushback from the occult world, but I think your approach is really interesting, and it's
mm,
certainly, I think, the right direction to look at these phenomena. Um,
mm.
um, where's the best place for people to find you if they want to
Okay.
read more of your work?
Yeah. Um, well, I'm the only basically, if you want to buy a book, then the only place you can buy a book is at Pierre Sabacc Books. Sabak is spelled Sabak, so Pierre Sabacc Books. I've got a YouTube channel, so please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do try and put on information, and I do try and interact a little bit with my audience on YouTube. So I do try and answer comments. I can't always promise to answer individual comments, and again, it varies. Sometimes I'm mega busy and I won't answer any comments, and sometimes I'll answer everybody's comments. It just depends on what I'm doing at the time. I'm currently working on a project with Chris Turner. Doing I'm working on a film called Don't Mention the Reptiles Part 2, which is a follow-up to his David Icke film, which he did. So I've done some filming for that, and I could be doing some more filming. So I'm really looking forward to that. So please check out the advert for that. That's on Chris. If you look up Pierre Sabak and Chris Turner, you will find the advert for that. And yeah, and I've been in contact, and I've been sort of swapping ideas with the researcher Paul Sinclair. He's released a fantastic book called The Night People, and I definitely recommend people, get a copy of The Night People. It's really a very detailed deconstruction of his experiences with these aliens and entities, which he describes as the night people. And it's a very intelligent, very clever book. And there's just another author I would like to plug as well, which is Philip Kinsella. He's completed a book, The Guardian of the Dead, which is a book about his mediumship. But again, Philip Kinsella has had interactions with non-human entities, which is found within his research and writing. And these are all really interesting authors working in the UK. As my friend Neil Haig as well. He's just finished a book on astrotheology called Orion's Door, which is a very heavy, very detailed, in-depth deconstruction of Orion and the symbology behind Orion. In fact, it's probably the most detailed work written on Orion, so I really recommend that book as well. And of course, if you're interested in Scaphology, then please pick up a copy of my book, Holographic Culture. I want to emphasize that where I'm talking about here, there is no other book like this, because I've gone into the etymology and the words. It's taken me 20 years. Holographic Culture itself took me 8 years to put together. So it was a massive book because I had to go into the languages and I had to deconstruct the languages. So it's a very original book, and it's a piece of research that you really can't get anywhere else. This is not a paste or copy job. This is a piece of original research, which will change your viewpoint in terms of the angelic tradition, which is relating to the scaphological tradition. So yeah, that's there are a few of my friends who are working within ufology who are really, I think, making a real impact within new ufology or scaphology or ufology. But these are the up and coming researchers, and I really recommend that you check out their work. And it's been wonderful. Thank you, Dara, for having me on your show. You've been a wonderful host. You're obviously very, very well read, and it's such a joy to speak to someone who's so articulate and so well read into the subject. So thank you for inviting me on your show.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Well, we can return the compliment. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really illuminating chatting to you, and again, I really appreciate your time and the depth of your research. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Pierre for his time. It's quite a bit to unpack there, and some interesting twists and turns from the regular themes on this show, which is good. It's important. And we'll be doing it again. We'll be going down some poorly lit roads in the future. So I hope you guys will come with me. It's important to get off the map sometimes. No one and no system has all the answers. Okay, that's all from me. Talk soon.